Hi everybody, it's Adam Duff, and I have a special little video for you. I wanted to give you a formal introduction of my brand new site. It's a tutorial site, and it's completely designed around you guys, artists, that is, digital painters, concept artists, designers, you name it. The whole point behind it is to create a forum where you guys can get involved, ask questions, offer feedback, give suggestions for future content, all kinds of stuff. So it's really a community for you guys to get involved in. All right, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be packed with resources. It already is, but I'm going to be adding content, either stuff that I find online that I find is really relevant, something that's really fun for you guys to check out, including other artists, including tutorials by other artists, resources, schools, interviews, the whole gambit. Okay, so it's really going to be an awesome way for you guys to uh, connect with the entire community and get to know what's out there and get involved. Be a part of the production and the growth of this site. So I'm going to give you a little quick tour just so you can get an idea of how everything works and what to go check out. All right. So the first thing I would take you to, there's a lot of stuff here you can check out on your own, but if you check out the press section, this section generally involves all the interviews. If you scroll down the side, you're going to see a ton of interviews that I find are inspiring. I'm not just going to include generic interviews. I want to include only the kind of stuff that really gets you going, that offers you really useful advice, that offers a lot of inspiration, insight into the industry, and a career as a professional artist, of course. Also included are links to videos and different things that I've done collaborating with other artists. Like, for instance, we have the critique sessions and the brush sauce theater contests hosted by Tyler Edlin. Um, Links to Imagine Effects and interviews and stuff like that. All kinds of cool stuff. A little quick mention. This is a work in progress. It's still not fully developed. I'm putting a lot of work into this, but I'm starting a program, a a mentorship program very soon. So I'm putting a lot of work into it. I'm going to be announcing that soon. All right. So just a quick mention, but it's not ready just yet. I'll be announcing that. And last but not least, the tutorial forums. Now, these videos are uploaded on YouTube, as you know, because you're probably watching this on YouTube. Duh. But the whole point behind it is to create a community. And for me, the whole learning experience really starts to happen not when you watch a video and try to get the best out of it, but it's when you start asking questions, getting that feedback you need. So if there's you watch a couple of the videos or something like that, and there's something you'd really love to know more about, ask me directly. And because it's a community, you'll be able to ask anybody who's involved in the conversation, anybody who's in on it. And it's growing fast. A lot of people are starting to jump in on the bandwagon. So it's a lot of fun, and we've already gotten a lot of buzz going on. All right. So the main page here, the tutorial page, is where you will access all of either the tutorials or the tutorial series. And to baptize my new site, something I'm really stoked about, is my new character design series, Demons. So if you click on it, you get access to all of the videos that are uploaded, okay? And most importantly, you get access to the community forum, okay? You get involved, ask your questions. This is honestly an environment where there's no such thing as a quote unquote dumb question. I'm a teacher by profession. This is something I do in the brick and mortar sense of the word, okay? I teach in college. And uh, I don't believe in stupid questions. I don't believe in irrelevant questions. So, and neither does anybody who's involved uh, in this whole project either. Everybody that you're gonna run into are people that are super awesome people that are very open to offering any kind of feedback. So it's not only a way to reach out to me, it's a way to reach out to everybody else and start to make some connections and friends in the industry. Because as we all know, as a professional, that's probably one of the most important things you can do. All right. However, one of the important things to mention about these tutorials is that they're open-ended. These are based on themes. So in this particular case, the theme is demons, right? So when you come back with suggestions, you can say, hey, Adam, I would love it if you could, I'd love to see you do a design on this type of demon. Once you start to get to know what the narrative, what the story about these designs is all about, you'll know exactly what the type of stuff you'd like to see. So let me know. shoot out your idea and let me know, and your idea might end up in a video, all right? And an actual, it might actually end up as a piece of artwork. Now, as more videos, as we add more and more videos, as you can see, the list is adding up quite quickly. Um, as we add more videos, this list is going to get longer and longer, and you might not want to have to, scroll through the whole thing to get to the forums. So I put a nice big fat red button. Jump straight to Demon's Forum. Could you be more literal than that? And there you go. It sends you right to the spot you want. Okay. Last thing I want to mention is subscribe. Okay. If you want to get immediate updates on new videos that are released or art relevant stuff, the stuff that you care about, then just come up here, enter your email address, blah, 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 hit subscribe, and you'll be a part of the mailing list, and I'll update you with whenever there's a brand new video. You're always going to be the first person to know, so you won't have to go fishing around or revisit the site every 2 seconds to see if anything new's up. All right. So it's a really handy way of doing it. And as I mentioned here, very important, I'm not going to spam you with nonsense. There's no marketing jargon. There's none of that stuff. It's just so you can have more direct connection to the artwork and to the forums so that you can so that you can get involved more easily. That's all it's about. There's no spamming or any kind of nonsense like that. All right. So thank you very much for joining me on this quick tour, and enjoy your video. Demons Part 6. Everybody, welcome to part 6. It's really the videos are really starting to rack up. We've got a lot going on. In this video, we're actually getting a chance to start a new character. In this one, we're going to do Betrayal. Okay, I really had a lot of fun painting this one. She's a very cool character. I really like how she turned out. Now she also has a very specific narrative, so I'll quickly run you through what she's about, the kind of thing that I was thinking. Now, it evolved a little bit. The narrative changed a little bit as I was moving forward with the character, but essentially the whole idea behind her was that she is a lure, right? Something that I'm sure that many of us have experienced. Somebody who pulls us in with their charm or with their physical beauty or whatever the case might be, and they lure you in, and you find yourself stuck in this situation with her. You can put it in if we were thinking about a relationship, for instance, you find yourself sucked into a relationship with somebody, and then you're sitting back and you're sitting there going, wow, what did I get myself into, type of thing. So there was a lot of symbolism behind her in terms of her aesthetic design. I personally, especially as of late, all of us as artists, male, female, a lot of us have gotten kind of caught up into the whole sexy chick bandwagon. Very often when we're painting, or at least the sexy chick stereotype bandwagon, because in my opinion, sexy chicks come in all different shapes and forms and stuff. But very often when you're painting male characters, what people very often have a tendency to do is, males, you can make them ugly and goofy and do all kinds of crazy stuff. There's generally in popular culture, we feel more liberty to mess around with male characters more. But when it comes to females, 99.9% of the time, it's always some like skinny chick, right? And to be completely honest with you, I've always been kind of turned off of that. I've always been kind of like, oh God, yeah, another sexy chick, and no matter how gorgeous they look, no matter how well rendered it is, I'm just going, just something about the whole typical sexy chick persona, at least the way they're generally painted, big boobs, tiny little body, little rib cage, small feet type of, the same kind of crap that we've been looking at for the last 100 years, and I just kind of got tired of it at a certain point. I've always been attracted to paintings. I guess having fine arts and being raised by a fine artist and having fine arts in my background as well as animation, right? Different body types. One of the main pleasures of body types is of what we consider sexy, for instance, is not just that mannequin crap, because to me there's no soul. There's no lure to a physique like that. It doesn't mean I have a thing against skinny people, but to give that skinny person some unique um, anatomical traits, right? She's skinny, but maybe she's got bony knees, or she's skinny and she might be skinny on top and fat on bottom, or she might be, like mess around, like have as much fun with the female anatomy as you do with the male. Like artists that really I find that really seem to understand and capture female characters and more so like attractive female characters understand that to make a female character attractive, you have to capture certain emotional qualities of that woman through the design that people are allured to. A perfect example, and you're going to laugh when I tell you this, but a perfect example is Bugs Bunny. You know, how many people have you heard say, when I saw Bugs Bunny dressed up as a chick when I was a kid, I used to think she was so hot. It's true because it's the persona, it's the role that Bugs is playing. It's how he's walking and how he's talking and all that kind of stuff, and the wiggle in his hips. And people going, that's actually kind of cute for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on it, and I'm looking at a male bunny cartoon. Like how messed up is that, right? But many people have expressed that feeling. I personally wasn't too hot on Bugs, but uh, nothing against you if you do. Like when I was young, there's like Smurfette. Little cartoon characters of like Smurfette and stuff like that. When you were young, as young kids, very often they would find her cute. They would find her attractive. Maybe not in an adult sense, of course, because they're young, but there was an attraction to that female role. Maybe because she was the only female in a cast of 2,000 male Smurfs running around. But you get my drift, right? So for me, when I'm painting female characters, I don't concern myself with the perfect anorexic model proportions. That kind of stuff really bores the crap out of me. I like to play around with natural body types and even exaggerated body types to a certain degree. In this particular case, I want a woman who is really big, but still put her in the context of a sexy, alluring woman. Putting a large woman in the context of being a diva, I find is a very powerful statement. A lot more powerful than your typical female character because you're she's new. She's fresh. Her design is different. There's something new to look at, right? And that makes her more compelling. That's how most of the people I know as artists, when they create art that a lot of people respond to, they go, wow, that's really cool. It's because they know that they want to see it, even though, typical, in video games and film and all that stuff, people just don't seem to get the hint, but the real skilled artists, the ones that have been doing this for like 10, 20, 30 years or more, those are the guys that really start to get experimental with the female body. And the female body, from an artistic perspective, is just as versatile, if not more versatile than the male body. But so many people take that for granted and really don't utilize that. One of the I really got a lot of kick out of watching animation. You see that like a sexy hippo in a tutu. There's a real femininity and grace to that character, and those gifted animators at Disney really capture that, right? So in her particular case, just to get back to the narrative for a minute. Because you've seen how you're watching how I've constructed her. I started with the base tone, and then I got a base light pass, and now I'm doing a second light pass, and I'm separating the metallic structures on her on a separate layer so that I can render them out separately, just to save me a bit of time and stuff. But in her particular case, I thought of allure, right? You notice that with Anguish, she's got spikes that are kind of repelling spikes. They force you to kind of you'll pull away from spikes like that. But in her particular case, I aligned those spikes up with a very sexy part of the female body, right? Which is down the back of her neck and down the middle of her spine and down the middle of her butt, right? And it's accentuating that feminine curve through her body. And I angled them in a way that if you were to, for instance, hug her or hold her close, you would be skewered. You wouldn't be able to get off, right? And I added a few, that hook to the back. You'll notice I added that extra hook to the top of her headdress type of thing that extends up the back of her neck and up off the top, because I was thinking of like fish hooks or burrs. You know, you walk into a burr bush, which I actually did today. You walk into a burr bush and you get all these little hooked spikes on you, and you can't let them go. You can't get rid of them. They're just easy to get on, very hard to get off. So the whole idea behind her is that her body is a lure, but if you come close to her, you're going to get hooked and hurt, right? It's that whole betrayal thing. It's the whole element of betrayal. As far as her face is concerned, that's where I wanted to step away from the whole humanesque body and create something monstrous in her, because that's kind of where her true personality resides, right? She might be alluring you physically with her body, kind of like, like in Silent Hill, the nurse characters, how they had their brilliant character designs where they've got these kind of sexy bodies, but they're soulless faces. And that's what makes them so scary, because it's messing with you. Well, part of you wants to look at it, and a part of you is freaking out, right? Is creeped out by them. So it's that kind of play on look at me, don't look at me type of thing. And with her face, I thought of I was thinking, when I was thinking about luring, I was thinking about fish hooks, and then it made me think about deep sea fish, because I love documentaries on the deep sea, like the anglerfish and stuff like that. I love that stuff. I've watched a lot of Dr. Ballard's stuff. I love he's just one of the most inspiring people I know, and the anglerfish has a lure, right? They lure you in with this light, and then they catch you with their teeth, and it's like a trap. It's like a Venus flytrap. You just can't get out, right? It's this cage of needles that just holds you in place. It's an extremely painful thing. And it's as far as the eyes are concerned, it's a very soulless gaze. It's just these lenses. And the only reason she has eyes, the only reason the anglerfish has eyes, is to find you and eat you. That's pretty much their only intention. Apart from that, they don't give a crap. She still has that empty, hollow face, right? And I made sure that with her teeth, the way I angled her teeth is at the angle inwards, right? Like any kind of predator or whatever the case might be, like, crocodiles or anglerfish or anything where that has prominent teeth and jaw muscles to grab onto their prey, they generally have teeth that angle inwards, not only to grip, like when they grip their prey, it's to hold them in place so they can't escape. They can hold on tight and not let go until their prey is dead, right? But it's also to help tear flesh, to pull flesh away from the corpse. It's kind of the idea I had right there, like I was very much inspired by the anglerfish design at that particular point. Now, as far as the metallic devices that she straps onto her body, again, it falls into the same narrative as the rest of the characters. They're self-designed to suit their needs and to create a certain sense, a certain emotional reaction in their audience. She did this to herself. And the whole idea of her, faceting and spiking this kind of harness into her, like right down the back of her spine. Imagine where those spikes are fastened in, not only holding on, gripping on the left and right, but also pierced right into her spinal cord and right into her coccyx bone. You can just imagine how incredibly painful that would be, right? And you can I was imagining that because it's following the curve of her spine, when she twists and turns, you can hear that. You can hear those metallic hinges scraping together. Whenever she moves, it would be this metallic hinge sound of her moving, because I kind of think like an animator. I always imagine sound effects and stuff like that because I'm a nerd. I apologize. But okay, so that's basically the idea that's going on right there. And I'm also, you'll notice in terms of design, look at the curves. Look at the curve of her jaw and how it leads upwards into the spikes, right? Look at the spike that goes through the top of her head, right? The one that comes out the front, and how that line follows the top of her eye socket. Everything's kind of following this very smooth design. I'm always thinking of lines that interconnect between one element and another to create this smooth transition, right? Now, one of the reasons why I gave her that Madonna-esque spiked bra, metallic bra thing, was A, to suggest what was going on in the front, right, to show that, to accentuate her femininity by adding breasts, but again, making them a very threatening upward pointing form that, if you skewer yourself, it's hard to pull yourself off of something that's facing upwards because you're going against gravity. If it was pointing downwards, you could slide off of the spike, but in this particular case, you're really stuck to her, right? But it was also to counterbalance a lot of the diagonal lines going in the opposite direction, right? I'm always thinking about line weight. So if I have a lot of lines that are like diagonal lines that are facing in one direction, I have one pointing in the opposite direction to counter that, right? It's as much a balancing element as it is an aesthetic element, and one establishing her 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 femininity, one that's accentuating her femininity. But you'll notice that I didn't, for instance, give her large breasts, because very often you'd associate big fat mama breasts on a larger woman. And I thought, again, why be stereotypical about it? There's nothing stopping me from giving her a large body but small pointy breasts, right? And I found by doing that, I was creating a visual element that A, fit with the aesthetic design, her graphic design, and B, made her unique, right? And that's what people like to see. People want to see something unique. People don't honestly really, you can paint a billion hot chicks and it's only going to get you so far, right? Um, if you think about people that have painted pretty women or hot chicks type of characters, that were very famous for painting those hot chicks, it's not just because they painted hot chicks. It's because they had a more important narrative playing at the same time. Like for instance, if you think of the pinup artist Jill Elfgren, an artist that I absolutely adore. I grew up reading his stuff. I loved his artwork, and he's a pinup artist. And the thing about pinup artists is that he's not just painting a sexy girl, is that he's painting a culture. He's painting a belief in society. He's painting a stereotype of women, right? He's not just being stereotypical, but he's actually portraying a stereotype. Woman, housewife, apron, pink knees because she's been scrubbing the floors, and the perfect heart-shaped head, and that whole type of posture. There's a graphic and aesthetic element that goes into his work, and a narrative element that goes into his work that makes it so alluring. But if it was just a series of hot chicks, then he would be very forgettable. And because his narrative was focused on the that's my lady coughing in the background for ambiance. Because he focused on an era and kind of narrating a certain time in our history, much like Norman Rockwell did, right? As time passes, as this artwork gets older and older, it actually the narrative becomes more and more powerful. It becomes more impressive as a narrative because it's reaching further and further back into history. Right? So if you are a quote unquote hot chick artist, ask yourself whether or not you're taking it far enough. Ask yourself whether or not there's actual purpose to the aesthetics, or is it just for the sake of doing pretty stuff? Because art's been around for a long time. We've seen plenty enough of it. And I'm sure many, more established artists and stuff like that would agree that just doing the hot chick thing just isn't enough anymore. We've been inundated with it, and it's time to move on and start really painting real women for the first time, because there's a lot more to it. We're taking a lot for granted, right? Now, getting back to the design that we've got here. Again, I wanted to stay within a very almost monochromatic color scheme. So notice that there is quite a bit of color, quite a bit of color variation. If you look at the skin tones, we're going from like silvers to slightly reds to slight magentas and oranges, and there's a lot of color going on. But I wanted to keep it as monochromatic as possible to fall within the same design theme that I had going on, right? If you look, so when it came to like coloring the lenses of her eyes, I gave it a bit of a kind of a copper a copper hue to it. Very desaturated, but a bit of a copper hue. Made them look a little bit kind of metallic, like kind of with this skin is kind of so big. These eyes are so big that kind of stretched the eyeballs, the skin around the eyes open a little bit. Um, I took out her nose to give her kind of this very offensive looking, gaping nostrils type of thing. Um, and a very slight deviation from that color to add a little bit more of a warm saturation where her teeth were, just to show that we're actually looking at enamel and not flesh dried, like kind of like desaturated corpsey type of flesh, right? So it kind of gives it a more of an enamel, more of a bone feel to it. Because again, a smile is extremely powerful, and the quality, the texture and the quality of those teeth tell you a whole lot about her physical health. In her particular case, her teeth are a weapon, right? Her teeth are something to grab onto you. They're not just she's not just presenting you with her expression. It's not just an expression. It's not just it's not a frightening expression, but it's one of the things she's going to hurt you with, right? So in her particular case, I wanted those teeth to be sharpened and prominent and very threatening and very uneven. And I made them more animalistic than I did, or animalistic in the anglerfish sense of the word, than I would regular human looking teeth. Now, in terms of the brushes that I was using here, one of the important things to mention as well is I deliberately, sometimes, not all the time, but I very deliberately sometimes like to work with a brush that's a little bit more challenging to blend with. It kind of forces you to um, it forces you to kind of focus on your technique and your hand control a little bit. And it was very important for me in this particular case to get that grungy grit to the feel of my piece. But as you'll see, and you'll notice, like if you've watched King's Harem, it's exactly the same principle. I use the same brush for the entire piece. For all of this, every material, everything that I painted, everything was painted with the same brush, because essentially it gives everything the same feel. And if you can find, my opinion is, when you find a brush that you like, keep working with it, because it allows you to continue your at that particular point. You stop worrying about how the brush works, and you can focus more on what you're painting, right? Some people go ape shit and paint with 2,000 different brushes. In the case where you're doing like a speed painting and you're using effects brushes or texture brushes to slap in some trees and rocks quick, that's a different story. But if you're doing something like this where you're painting something from scratch, like working very old school, very traditional, then in my opinion, don't go nuts with your brushes. Focus more on your own technique, focus on blending, focus on refining shapes, focus on just training the muscles of your hand and getting better at being a painter and a sketch artist, right? Get better at it just by doing it the way it's supposed to be done. Okay. But then I came in and I blended to make sure all of those, my shadows and my ambient occlusion and all of that was believable. It wasn't too shadowed. It wasn't too lit, that type of idea. I wanted to make a smooth transition with the skin and show where that, really, I even would very often, I would take my own fingers and I would pull it on my skin to see how skin pulls, how it looks when something sharp is pulling on the skin, without hurting myself too much, of course, right? But if I'm always looking for credibility, I'm always looking for believability in a piece of artwork. So, if I'm doing spikes pulling on skin, I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that's believable, right? So that's why I very often will use some kind of an image reference for that, because I have no way of knowing otherwise. You always discover things when you study reference. So it's something I strongly encourage and stuff like that. And as you can see here in the theme of how I approach the lighting scheme, adding that warm orange firelight to the front right of my character, helps add that extra layer of depth, right? And it helps add a little bit of depth to that character, while at the same time helping establish those three-dimensional forms and giving it a little bit more of a color variation in that sense, right? In her case, it's a little bit different because I wasn't starting on a dark surface. The front of her body wasn't a dark surface. Here you can see I'm adding a little reflection in the eyes because the eyes are more metallic or glossy, right? So I wanted to capture some of that. But it was on a light surface because I wanted to accentuate her femininity in this piece. So in order to do so, I was accentuating the fairness of her skin uh, to a certain degree because she's not exactly the most attractive looking woman. She's a little bit anglery looking, but you get my point. I want to accentuate that femininity. So I made that light, that fall of light, fall off a lot more smoothly over her body. It's not so much of a rigid, sharp cutoff of light. It functions in her particular case, a little bit more like a top light than a backlight that I was doing with the other characters. Okay, and I was doing that just by slightly angling my lighting in a different direction. And of course, once I've added that light to her body, I always have to make sure it's consistent. So I'm adding the light to the metal, but how that light is falling on that metal is very different because it's a different shaped surface. It's a different quality surface, and you'll notice as well that the color of the light hitting the metal is slightly different because it's slightly reflective and it's a little bit rusty. It's going to probably find a slightly higher saturation. It's going to be a little bit, I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit truer to the original light source than the light that's going to fall on her body because the color of her body is going to alter that color slightly, right? So I'm always thinking of my most reflective surface as my source of reference on what the actual light color is, or at least what's the closest thing to that light color, because surface color will always alter the color of light that falls on it, right? And I use that as a guide. So like for instance, on her body, it's a little slightly more peachy and a slightly lower saturation, perhaps a little bit higher value. On the metal, it's more of a richer orange. There's a slightly higher saturation to that. All right. So it's basically how I rendered out this entire thing. You can see it from beginning to end. And what I felt I needed a little bit in her to add to the spikes, to add to that sharpness, the metallic spikes to it, is I'm adding a little bit of some slightly hotter highlights to show that it's metal. And I'm adding some darker shadows because very often on a metallic reflective surface, you're going to get dark shadows next to the brightest highlights. It's kind of a little juxtaposition of light and dark that gives it that very reflective and refractive quality to it when you're rendering it out. Now at this particular point, I'm already, like, the design's done, right? But now it's really just a question of cleanup because I'm almost finished the character. I probably spent about an hour designing her. Don't forget, I was very warmed up because she's the 5th in the series of characters, right? So I've had a lot of practice and stuff. I did attempt another few character designs, ones that I might revisit for female characters because I felt my lineup needed more female characters in it. But at this point, it's just a question of refinement. I want those spikes to be very sharp. I want those forms to be very clean. I don't want to have areas that are, that are highly refined and other areas that aren't at all. So you notice I'm cleaning up my edges. I'm making sure the tips of those metallic spikes are very sharp because it's, a bit rough, just to make sure that we can feel the pierce of those things. But altogether, because I already had a color palette, a well-established color palette and lighting direction, and I was very warmed up with this theme of demons, this character took very little time to design, and she could function although she's in a lineup of characters, I treated everyone as if I can take each one of them out, stick them on their own page in my portfolio, and they can all stand alone on their own. They all have enough quality as individual characters. They're not dependent on their peers to function as characters, right? So that's it. We've gone all the way through. We just finished painting Betrayal. So thanks for watching, and remember, subscribe on my channel, adamduff.com. Just check in the description below and you'll find the link. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.